Thanks for joining us this afternoon. This is We've Got Issues, and I'm Nancy Furness. And we're filming on location in Port Moody at MLA Rick Glumac's office. And we're on the ancestral and unceded homelands of the Coquitlam, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, Squamish, Katzie, Kwantlen, Kakite, and Stalo nations. So today I'm joined by Omar Chu, who is a member of Tri-Cities Amnesty International, as well as Sanctuary Health. So thanks so much for joining us this afternoon, Omar.
Thank you for having me.
I think a lot of us are familiar with the Tri-Cities Amnesty Group and the good work that they do around human rights. I was wondering if you could tell us just a little bit about Sanctuary Health.
Sanctuary Health is a grassroots collective that advocates for access to services regardless of immigration status based on need. We engage in solidarity campaigns and direct support to people with precarious immigration status and help advocate for policies that support our friends and family and neighbors.
So there's one policy in particular that I was hoping we could talk a little bit more about today, and that's a sanctuary school policy. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What is a sanctuary school policy?
Sanctuary school policy is about ensuring the intention of the School Act when it was created. And sanctuary schools policies are about ensuring that all members of our community who are living here and are ordinarily resident here are accepted into school. And so that means that it's about accepting children who are resident here regardless of their immigration status, as well as affirming that districts will not share their students' information and protect their students' privacy should the Canada Board Services Agency contact them.
So are you saying that any child who lives here is eligible to go to school?
Yeah, any child who lives here with their parents is eligible for publicly funded education here in BC. As long as they're living here and this is their home, then they should have the right to go to school. It's about the right to education.
Okay. I can understand the value of ensuring that anybody who lives here has an education. In my mind, that just kind of supports the whole community and makes us all better in the long run. My understanding is that the province already sets the requirements for eligibility for children to attend school here. If that's true, if you can confirm that, then why do we need a separate sanctuary school policy?
So if you look at the School Act, when the School Act was passed, they legislated that all children who are ordinarily resident in British Columbia are eligible for a publicly funded education. When the School Act was passed, in earlier drafts, it said all children who are citizens or permanent residents are eligible for an education.
So that's a difference.
This was in the draft. This was in the draft stage.
Right.
So in the draft stage, they had permanent resident citizens. And then you had the BCTF, BC Teachers Federation, the School Trustees Association, the Association of Principals and Vice Principals, all wrote submissions and said, if you only accept permanent residents and citizens, you're leaving a whole bunch of families out. You're leaving out families on work permits. You're leaving out undocumented families. You're leaving out families with study permits, all these other families that are going to be left out. And so the rules, the legislation in the final version was changed so that it's an ordinary resident to include all these other families. Now, the province has, if we fast forward to today, the province has a policy where they explain some of the factors that might be considered when you're looking at whether someone's ordinarily resident. But they also say that they leave it up to districts to set their own policies on determining the exact definition of ordinary resident. And that's why in different districts across the province, you have different policies that have been established because the province has given some leeway to the districts to set those policies.
Well, that's interesting. So sort of the requirements versus the actual policy and how it's interpreted are left up to the individual municipalities. Do some municipalities actually have a sanctuary school policy in place?
Yeah, so New Westminster was the first school district to pass an explicitly sanctuary schools policy. And we've seen New Westminster's policy over the years improve as they get to know families in their district that they maybe didn't even know about before. But now that they realize this families are living here, you can see the reports from the New Westminster about the success of these policies registering these families. And most recently, the most recent district to pass a sanctuary schools policy was Victoria, which was just passed a couple months ago. So you can see more and more districts adopting these policies. The Surrey School District, they reached out to the province and they asked a question: what is the minimum amount of documents that we need to be able to register a child as ordinary resident? And they based their policy around those documents. They didn't call it a sanctuary schools policy. This is just their registration policy, and that's what we'd like to see.
We are here, Sanctuary Health is a grassroots collective of community workers and migrant families that we advocate for access for all services, regardless of immigration status. And Sanctuary Schools has been one of our community victories. There's other school districts that provide safe spaces for all children to go to school. And Canada is a signatory of the UN Conventions of the Right of the Children that explicitly commits to give access to basic education to all children. And the School Act also reinforces the right to provide access to basic education to all ordinary residents. And Coquitlam, we've been struggling. Omar already said, it's not acceptable that kids spend a whole year at home. It affects not only a child's well-being, but the family's well-being. And every time we share that there's kids that still don't go to school with people, they don't believe us. This is Canada. Everyone has the right to public, universal, free education. And no family should be rejected or fear detention, deportation, or rejection at the school district. The Sanctuary Schools policy ensures that all ordinary resident, local resident kids access basic education. And it also ensures that all families feel safe accessing schools, that no school districts provides any information regarding the immigration status of families to government officials. That the Canadian Border Service agencies should not be allowed in community spaces, particularly in schools and in school districts. So I just want to emphasize how there's so many stories of families that fear approaching an education institution, schools. That is not the kind of community that we want to build. And Coquitlam needs to be on board. All school districts, not like the province, already supports the policy and the right for education for all. And it's possible. New Westminster has a sanctuary schools policy. Vancouver, even the Okanagan. We're working with Surrey. So we're just like waiting for Coquitlam to get behind. So thank you so much for being here.
So what is the minimum requirements? Like, what are the minimum documents that somebody would need to provide in order to register their child?
You need to show that you're living here. You need to show that you are a member of the community. So, for example, if you have a rental agreement or a hydro bill, something like that. Maybe you have a letter from a community organization that shows that you've been volunteering or getting support there, and maybe they understand your situation a little bit better. The point is that there isn't necessarily specific documents that you need. You need to show that as a district, you've been looking at the family's circumstances. Is the family ordinarily resident here?
So there's no requirement to show like immigration documents or anything like that?
No, there's no requirement to. We've spoken directly to the province, and the province has said they do not request specific immigration documents for in their audits. And when they look, what they're looking for is, does your district have a policy where their policy is establishing if someone's ordinarily resident, and are you following that policy? That's what the audits are looking at. That's what we've been told directly by the Education and Compliance section of the Ministry of Education.
So are there children in SD 43, so in the school district here, who have been turned away or who are not able to access education?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is a frustrating thing that I've dealt with. I've seen children turned away from the school district. We've recently had a mother who came forward and spoke publicly at the vigil that we held about her experiences, as well as some other families as well. this is a mother who had successfully registered in Burnaby when she lived in Burnaby, and when she moved to Coquitlam, she was expecting a similar response, and instead was turned away, and is very frustrated in the way that she was treated. Another issue is also not just children turned away who are out of school currently, but children who were turned away initially and have had months or years outside of school before they're able to register. And I think for me, the point where I felt like, okay, we need to fight for a policy here in the Coquitlam School District is when I was supporting a mother who had experienced family violence and was a single mom who had experienced family violence and was trying to register her child in school. We had a letter from a lawyer explaining that she's considering her different options and that she's going to make an application. She hasn't made it, and the district insisted that she needed time to decide what application to do and what application best fit her circumstances. It was a complex decision that she needed time. The district insisted that she make an application and provide proof that she made that application before registering the kid in school. And so for me, after spending hours trying to explain this to officials at the school district and receiving the same response, I thought we need to have a policy here. We can't be going case by case and putting families through this over and over again.
Well, I think it, like you said, case by case, so it depends who's looking at it. If you don't have a policy in place, I think sometimes it works well as long as a person is in that position who understands things a certain way, but I think you also run the risk that when staff changes and personnel change, that acceptance will also change. So it doesn't lead to stability. Nobody really knows what the rules are if there's no policy in place.
And what Coquitlam's trying to do now is the opposite. They put in policies where they're asking for very specific documents, and they have check boxes, and so that makes it easy for school districts to sort of go, staff to go through and check off the boxes. But what the problem is, what happens when families don't have those documents in those check boxes? Well, how are we dealing with those families? What is the guidance around those families? And right now, the guidance seems to just be to turn them away.
So some training perhaps as well for staff and personnel to understand that there's a degree of flexibility that needs to be recognized in these situations?
Training for staff on understanding the complexities of our immigration system and the complexities of the journeys of migration that people go through, and that people may not have specific documents, but that doesn't mean that they're not living here and are members of our community.
Well, it seems too that the population that we're talking about may be one that's a little more vulnerable and maybe can't access the resources that they need as easily as somebody who is maybe born and raised here. Maybe language is an issue. So there's all sorts of other challenges as well. So I can see the benefit of maybe having that education or sort of training in place.
Absolutely.
I just want to circle back just really quickly. You had mentioned that there was a family and they had registered in Burnaby successfully. They moved here and they were unable to register. Can you tell us, without naming names or going into too many details, what's the status of that child now? Are they registered somewhere or?
Yeah, so I think I can. This mother has been public and spoke publicly about the situation. Okay. Currently, after she was turned away by Coquitlam, she went and spoke to the principal, and the principal said, of course, she can continue to study here in school in Burnaby. That was generous of the principal. If she's ordinary resident in Coquitlam, she should be registered in Coquitlam. Mm-hmm. What it means is that she's having to travel an hour each way every day to bring her child to school. She's got a newborn baby that she's bringing with her. When winter comes and it's going to be winter, that's just going to end up harder as she fights the elements to get her kid to school. So we're very grateful to this principal who's allowed her to continue to go to school in Burnaby, but really she should be here in Coquitlam, and that would be best for the child, for the family, and for all parties.
Education is a human right for everyone. Children have the right to go to school. It's a human right. It's a human right. And now it's like having a child inside apartments, having children with no right for education. Is that the Canada that people want? No. We don't want any Canada with segregation. We are tired of segregating people, right? And at this time, I think that we need the school district to recognize that people are coming from different experiences. People are migrants and refugees from different experiences. Being a refugee is not only entitled to the concept of the United Nations. Being a refugee and migrant, it's something that people have different backgrounds. Some people are migrants because they had to flee their country because there is a civil war. But there is also people who are fleeing Mexico, who are fleeing other countries in Latin America because the drug cartels have been taking power. They decide on the lives of people. They decide if they let their 10 years old to grow in those communities taken by the drug cartels. A year later, in Honduras, when children are 11 years old, they don't belong to the families anymore. They belong to the gangs. They belong to the drug cartels. They are obligated. They are forced. Then, when people arrive here, they face these barriers, and then they are already survivors. And then they come here expecting some kind of good treatment, and they are finding this barrier. They are finding this barrier from the school system. And the Ministry of Education is clear. Residence means the place where people live and they have right for education. Residence is not immigration status at all. It's not immigration status. Residence is where you live, and if people live in Coquitlam, if people have precarious immigration status, they still have the right for education.
That's an important part of being part of the community, is to, participate in school in the place where you're actually living and growing up. So gratitude to that principal who sort of saw beyond that, and hopefully, things will be resolved at some point so that that child can come back to Coquitlam and go to school there. So Amnesty International, or Tri-Cities Amnesty, and Sanctuary School, both working, or Sanctuary Health, I should say, are both working on this issue together. So there was a rally on October 17th outside of the school district's office. Can you tell us something a little bit more about who all the players, or who all the people, participants were there, and what the rally was all about?
I think the rally was, we had a vigil to sort of commemorate the right to education for families, and it was as a result of frustration building over years of families being turned away or families not being able to access, and the courage of Priscilla, one of these mothers who was ready to go forward and speak publicly about her experiences. Right. I think oftentimes when a family is turned away, there's a fear factor of not wanting to speak up. There is the factor often that a child is not in school and trying to figure out a different way to get them in school, and there's just bigger priorities in time. But Priscilla has bravely offered to sort of be a representative for these families, and we want to show support for her. It was actually her idea partially to do this, and we want to show support for all the families who've been turned away, and show a message that we're not going away. We'll continue to ask for a sanctuary schools policy. We'll continue to work with the district when they're ready to pass a sanctuary schools policy. As we have in other districts, as we've worked with New Westminster, as we've supported with campaigns in Victoria and Central Okanagan and across the province.
So the door is open as far as Sanctuary Health and Tri-Cities Amnesty is concerned with continuing to talk and try to resolve this issue. Can I read you a quote from School District 43? So they issued a statement saying that School District 43 has actively responded to all concerns raised by Tri-Cities Amnesty International in the past and has incorporated changes based on meetings with them, and it's unclear why they are choosing to hold a rally. So can you talk about, have you met with them and have they responded to concerns?
So I've met with assistant superintendents at the district. We've also presented to the school board. It's funny. It's funny, that quote to me, because when I was speaking to the previous assistant superintendent, Reno Chiolfi, one of his most common lines he would say to me is, "We're going to have to agree to disagree." And so I think
that's different than resolution.
I think they should be well aware that we've been in disagreement. Reno's since retired. the contact now is Nadine Tambellini. We've shared with Nadine and we've shared with the school board why we want a sanctuary schools policy, why we want a policy that shows that there are not specific immigration documents that you need, and they are aware of these families that have been turned away. The district is aware of these families that have been turned away that we've been advocating for. So I'm a bit surprised I'm a bit surprised that they don't know that we're frustrated. I think I've expressed our frustration to them multiple times and in different ways, and we hoped that by presenting to the school board we could bring this attention and we'd see some action, and we haven't seen it. So it is a bit funny to me. I don't know what to
well, there
think of that.
definitely seems to be a disconnect somewhere. We have requested an interview with School District 43, and they have agreed, but we haven't been able to find a date that works so far. So hopefully we'll be able to talk to them as well. So it sounds like you're not satisfied with the actions, if any actions have in fact been taken. It doesn't sound like anything has been communicated.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what they're referring to that. They might be referring to they've changed their registration form. We had shown them like how we compared Surrey's registration guidelines to Coquitlam's, and we showed that to them and said, like, look at the difference, look at the documents that Surrey's asking for, look at the documents that Coquitlam's asking for. Perhaps their change to the formatting of their checklist
Have
is
they communicated that back to you?
They've communicated to us that they were changing it, that they were trying to make it easier to understand what documents are needed. And I said, that's not what we're asking about. We're not asking about making it easier to understand what documents are needed. We're asking you to change the documents you're asking for, or change the documents you're looking for. And I've communicated that. I think they should know that. But I hope that those changes are coming.
So you are basically asking for a sanctuary school policy to be implemented in School District 43. Are there any other actions that you're asking them, or are you wanting them to meet with the families to come to resolution or anything like that?
Yeah, I'd very much like them to meet with families to try to register them, but I don't want to put these families through meetings if the end game isn't going to be registering these kids in school. And I think right now with the current policies, these families are not going to register, and I don't want to put these families. I don't want to put these families through that if there's no end goal. So that's why I think we need the policy first. We need some changes in policy, but we need to get these kids registered in school as soon as possible. And so that's a challenge that we're facing. We have individuals that need to be registered now, and we need changes in policy, and would love for the school district to move on both.
Well, and I think you raise a good point. Like, the longer it takes to get these children into school, the further behind they get and the more marginalized they are at risk of becoming. So to have them enrolled as soon as possible is important. So it's an urgent situation. Are any further actions or rallies planned to sort of push this into the spotlight?
So I think we've heard from some school trustees who've said that they don't believe that there's any families being turned away, and they'd like to meet them. So I think the next step is try to introduce some of these families to the trustees, and there's certainly going to be more actions if there's not action from the school district. So we'll see.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Omar, and hopefully we can see some resolution. Hopefully we'll be able to talk to School District 43 as well. And I just, wish you all the best in resolving this issue, and hopefully we can see all children realizing their right to an education in BC. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. This is We've Got Issues, and we've been joined by Omar Chu from Tri-Cities Amnesty International and Sanctuary Health. So also like to thank Tri-Cities Community Television for filming today's interview.
Thank you.